You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello from the Wheatfield. Here we are. It is I, Matt, and I am here with Bob, as always. Hello, Bob.
Hello, Matt. Hello, everybody.
It's so nice and quiet and serene out here. I don't want to break the silence.
Except for that truck coming up the Emmitsburg Road.
Well,
and the ghost voices you'll hear when you play it back.
Yes, the
That's your part,
EVPs or
Eric.
whatever they call it.
Eric, give me the ghost voice.
If I was a ghost, that'd be my time to shine.
And that heavenly voice is Jessie Wheedleton.
Yeah.
Back for your second time.
I know, I wasn't too badly scarred by the first one.
Yeah, you got over it. You were our very first one. By the way, it has the highest number of downloads from all the Aska guides.
Well,
Just because
it
it's
was
been
like
there
2
long.
hours.
Was there visual?
No, there was no visual, but people do love Jessie's little voice.
Aw,
She did
thanks.
break her tailbone, though.
I know.
Nobody needs to know this.
That's terrible. You're coccyx. And then, of course, Eric, the producer, is over there avoiding the microphone, but he's going to... Hello, Eric.
As always.
Okay. And so today we are in the Wheatfield. Happy to be here. We're out by Winslow's Battery, which is the two Napoleons that are out in the middle of the field up on the... I guess this is the highest point in the middle of the Wheatfield, isn't it? Yeah, looks that way. And we solicited... well, first of all, our patrons over at Patreon are the ones that decided that we would do it from this location. And this was back when the quarantine began, and, I thought, a couple days will be fine, and then, no, that's just not what happened. So, weather wasn't cooperating. Anyway, it's a week longer than we wanted to, before we got to do this. Bob, you don't want to walk too far away with the microphone there.
I know.
Okay. Well, no, you just pulled this out of my
How long are these cords?
like 10 feet or so.
right, so
Anyway,
there's your distance.
we are out here in the Wheatfield. The patrons chose this location to be our first on the field Ask a Guide. Tim Smith was going to join us, and this morning he said he's not feeling well, but he doesn't think it's the Rona, so that's good.
Now I got to make up everything without him. Damn.
And then
Well, I did see him at the liquor store getting a case of Corona last night.
Oh, is that what he meant when he said I got a case of the Corona? Anyway, so we're all just happy to be out of the house and around other people. Of course, we are keeping our social distancing. We're on opposite ends of the field basically here, but
It's so nice not to be able to smell Matt in the studio.
all right, so we're going to start then with some of your questions by the way, how are you guys handling the quarantine and all that? Are you going crazy yet? Anybody?
What are you doing, Bob? Writing your book?
I'm writing, yeah.
Bob's
I'm just
writing.
writing. I got an idea from an Ask a Guide question we had a while back, and I'm just
Nice.
spending a lot of time writing.
And you?
The
I've been
Crucible
working on
of
house
Courage,
projects.
it's going to be called.
Oh,
The what?
okay.
The Crucible of Courage.
I like that.
A cave at Gettysburg.
Oh.
You put Gettysburg in the name, people will
People
look
are like,
at it.
oh, there was a cave? And little does anybody know, this is actually about Gettysburg in the prehistoric times when the cavemen were here.
Yeah, there's petroglyphs inside this little cave.
Yeah.
Jesse, what are you doing?
We've been sanding our floors.
Well, that's fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of dust.
Yeah.
I get to urethane them myself after I go home.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Great. Well, good. All right. All right. So let's start here with JP Horsemanship, who is going to find an extra horse for me to ride next time he comes down. And he's going to start us off with a good question that I think needs clarification. And along with answering this question, I want you guys to give us just a brief overview of the action that took place here. Why are people so obsessed with the Wheatfield? But he says, I always wondered what defines the boundaries of the Wheatfield. I know where it's located, but someone refers to the Wheatfield. It seems to overlap with the Peach Orchard and Devil's Den, in my mind at least. So what would you say are the boundaries of the Wheatfield?
Well, Matt, let me handle that for a minute. I just stuck my mic out north of where I'm standing in the middle of the Wheatfield because there was a truck coming down the road.
I
and I was
noticed.
hoping people would hear that.
My microphone is going to pick up everything back behind.
That is, in my mind, the road, which you all will probably recognize as the Wheatfield Road.
Right.
In my mind, that's the northern boundary of the Wheatfield. The road was there in 1863. It was called the Millerstown Crossroad. Just beyond that road, just north of it, is a woods, which is known as the Trussell Woods, after the family who lives just north of here. The farmer who owns the property we're standing on is George Rose. George Washington Rose, I think his name was. And anyway, he had about 20 or so acres cleared here. And though it is somewhat boulder strewn, it was in 1863 a field of standing wheat about waist high for a Civil War soldier. I think genetically wheat is modified today to be smaller, but it was taller back then. And so it would have been waist high. It was golden. It hadn't been harvested yet. It was a winter wheat crop. And
what's a winter
wheat
crop?
You'll actually, I believe, I'm not a farmer, but I believe that means you'll kind of plant it in the fall, and over the winter it just is there. And you see it as you drive around. Even now, you see green fields.
Yeah.
That's the winter wheat just beginning to come up. Okay. And so it's ready to be harvested usually by early July or so.
I get it. Okay. Very
So
good.
it was ready to be harvested, but it hadn't been harvested yet in 1863.
Got it.
So what makes up the boundaries of this? I am, and we are all standing here, I'm standing, but we're sitting here. I am facing right now basically southwest. I'm facing the same direction that these cannons are of Winslow's battery. There would have been 6 here, I believe, on July 2nd, 1863. They're facing southwest because the first Confederate attacks are coming from the southwest. I already said the northern boundary of the field is this road. The southern boundary of the field, a little harder to determine, but there is a rock wall, and beyond and it's still there today. Beyond the rock wall is another woods. Sometimes this is referred to as the South Rose Woods, and beyond that woods, the terrain rises, which is part of the whole basic Wheatfield fight. So if anything's the boundary of the Wheatfield, it's probably that rock wall to the south. Of course, if you control a wall, you control the ground around the wall. And militarily, that's an important feature. As I'm facing southwest now, if I turn 90 degrees to my left, there, through the trees without leaves this time of year, I can see Little Round Top plainly on the other side of the trees. Those trees sometimes are known as the East Rose Woods. They're on Houck Ridge, and they're the trees between the Wheatfield and the Little Round Top. And between the ridge and Little Round Top is the Valley of Death, as some people call it. Where Plum Run or Bloody Run will flow through. So if there's a western or an eastern boundary of the Wheatfield, I would say it was those woods. And if there is a western boundary, now as I turn 180 degrees and look more towards the northwest instead of the southwest, I am looking at another little hill, sometimes called the Stony Hill. It is wooded and it is somewhat boulder strewn. The woods there are sometimes called the West Rose Woods, and if there is a boundary of the Wheatfield, it would be that particular hill and where those woods are. So in between the road to my rear, the north, the rock wall to my front, the south, and between the woods to my left, between Little Round Top and the Wheatfield, and the woods to my right, which the other side of that is the peach orchard, would be this 20 or so acres of cleared ground.
So if you come here to Gettysburg, listen to the answer to this question from Winslow's battery, and you face the way the guns are facing, and you're looking roughly southwest there, right, Bob? Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And
then listen to what Bob says and follow him as you stand in the spot.
And the other terrain feature, which is, I think, important for this, besides the hills, the ridges on either side of us, and the rock wall in front of us or to the south, and the road to our rear with the woods, is this little ridge, I guess, that we are on. It's just a little part in the middle of the Wheatfield that is raised, higher ground, and that's why Matt wanted to do this today, because it's a little bit chilly out here this morning, and we had some rain all day yesterday, or a good part of the day yesterday, so we wanted to stay dry. But this crest of the ridge here will expose soldiers standing as I am today. and it'll afford some protection to soldiers coming from the north. And once they're up here, they may be in trouble because they're looking at a line of Confederate soldiers.
Yeah, Jesse, you were going to add something?
Well, there's the physical wheat field, and then there's the fighting in the wheat field, which is a very fluid situation. So often it's the troops that are at one time in the field, that are referred to as far as numbers count. I would say, even though you've got the Stony Hill, that would be to Bob's right, and you've got some
to the
woods
batteries,
up there.
Right?
Those troops are generally included in the Wheatfield
Correct.
fight.
Because they came through the wheat field and then passed back through it again.
But there's a significant separation, I would say, because the listener is asking about the fight for the peach orchard and Devil's Den, that it seems to overlap. I'd say the very distinct difference would be from the Wheatfield fight to the peach orchard, because there's just a gap for lack of troops there.
Those are separate.
You can stand at the edge of the field and look up that way. You can see a pretty large
the way, from listening to people talk about it, the way my mind always processed it was that, like, the Wheatfield was the umbrella name of the action, and then Stony Hill or Rose's Woods, all these different places that the fighting went to are like underneath the Wheatfield umbrella.
There's a lack of Union troops from here to the peach orchard.
Right.
But then later in the fight, you have South Carolina troops, Georgia troops, Mississippi troops, coming over the peach orchard, the Emmitsburg Road Ridge, and coming through this way. So, you do have people coming from that area that enter the Wheatfield. So that's where you can have some overlap there.
Then also, like, the peach orchard, the Wheatfield, Devil's Den, they're all part of essentially the same greater action, though, right?
We're all on the
it's
same,
all part of
Longstreet's
assault.
as far as Sickles' line
and maybe
goes.
we should go there too, just to put it in some context.
So basically, Sickles' line is pivoting at the peach orchard, stretching through the Wheatfield, basically just so it can get to the Devil's Den, just to be on Houck's Ridge there in front of Little Round Top.
Right.
But where you can kind of divide the troops that participate in the Wheatfield fight from the Devil's Den, my husband always corrects me. He's like, it's just Devil's Den, not the Devil's Den.
Well, the Devil's Den fight, you were about to say. That's good.
But is Ward's Brigade. So Ward's Brigade stretches over the Devil's Den ridge coming toward us, but pretty much ends at the edge of the field itself.
Right.
Okay.
And most people don't consider them, even though the 99th Pennsylvania was there for a little while before they went further south to the fight in Devil's Den.
And I guess while we're talking about the physical boundaries of the Wheatfield, why don't we put the Wheatfield in context of the whole battle? Why is it such a big deal? What was it part of? I mean, give us an overview of everything, whoever wants to take that.
So in the Wheatfield, we're between the high ground of the Emmitsburg Road that Sickles wanted, and we're in between that and the next high ground before Little Round Top, was basically as far as Sickles could stretch his forces, was Houck's Ridge terminating at the Devil's Den.
Okay.
So if Sickles can't get Little Round Top, at least he's in front of it, at least he's on a ridge in front of it, and he's trying to reach that spot through our area. So it's lightly defended at first, and very quickly when George Meade realizes that this isn't going to be a strong enough line to hold what's coming, you got some 5th Corps troops that are already, Sickles is already pulling more people out to kind of fill in these gaps from the 5th Corps. So his 3rd Corps is really just they're going to be trying during this fight to hold their front. But as Meade is sending troops in from the Union side, obviously, it's just to buy him time to get a line for them to fall back to when this front line ultimately collapses. He's looking for the fishhook line behind them, but he needs time to kind of fill that in and hold off this attack from getting through the line. Because right now this is the line.
Meade is sending reinforcements out here to keep the fight out here and away from his main line until he can fortify the main line, right? Is that what you're saying?
They've got to defend the flank, and they don't have enough men to do it.
Got it.
So they're out here basically buying time, and Meade's hoping to form that line on the ridge that is east of us.
Yeah.
Okay. The shoulder of Little Round Top
Cemetery
through to
Ridge.
the Cemetery Ridge, and And from the Confederates' perspective, of course, Longstreet wasn't expecting this when he's forming his plan for his attack. So as the Confederates are coming in, they're looking to find the flank of the Union line. And as they shift further and further down under cannon fire from the Peach Orchard, they're going to find it at the Devil's Den.
Okay.
And that's where the first attacks are made. So the first waves of action are going to come from that area and work their way up to us. So if that fight starts around 4:30, then it's probably around 5 o'clock by the time Confederates start entering the Wheatfield fight from the south.
That was a chair. Go ahead.
And it's going to, Longstreet sending brigade by brigade further and further up the line. And that's kind of what turns into these waves back and forth in the Wheatfield fight. So the problem with the Wheatfield fight is Sickles' line is weak to begin with. They get some help, but it's not strong enough. The Confederates push through, and as reinforcements are coming from Union lines, it's like nobody gets here at the right time to just settle in with other troops. They're coming in as the brigades before them are leaving, giving bad directions on their way out of the field. Okay. So you're coming into the field, you don't know quite what's next. And maybe what happened to the people who were in the field before you, maybe that attack came from the south or southwest, but now you're facing the South Carolina troops that are coming in from the west, not expecting that. So it's hard to know which direction to face your brigades and everything. And this is a very confusing part of the fight. Like, we've tried to look through and combine accounts and to figure this out, that there's 3 phases of the field, but of the fight, but to the soldiers fighting in it, it's just pure chaos. And they're shifting around, trying to find space, because when you go up to the Stony Hill, that was a place that was occupied several times by different units coming in, because we don't have much high ground around this field, and that's certainly the better of the positions in the field. I remember when I first started studying the battlefield, just coming to the battlefield, we were walking around looking at those monuments going, they can't fit all these people in here. Like, what is going on up here? But no, they were all there at different times. So there's not really room for everybody to be here at once.
Right.
And
that is a good point. When you go up around the loop there's a lot of monuments from different corps. And it could be confusing until you realize that they're not all there at the same time.
So when you just count the troops that participate in this part of the fight that evening, and you ignore the troops fighting in the Peach Orchard, Union troops especially, but you include the Confederate troops that come over the Peach Orchard and come through here, and you exclude the troops fighting north and south around Devil's Den, there are about 18,000 troops that end up making contact with the field, and about 5,000 to 6,000 casualties in just really 2 hours time, from 5 o'clock until it starts to get too dark to tell who's who at the end of it.
How many times did it change hands before it finally was over?
Well, you can say that I think the wayside marker says there's 6 changes of occupation of the field, it's a very fluid thing. So there's
6 or 7.
generally 3 large phases of what's going on here.
Yeah, if you include just the south end of the Wheatfield, which is where that rock wall is, I think you could make a case for 6.
Okay.
But when the Trobriand's men pulled away from their Union soldiers, the Confederates didn't actually occupy that ground. Okay?
Got it.
But I think you could make a fairly safe case for at least 4 major changes of the Wheatfield.
Okay.
One man said that you could walk from one end of the field to the other when it was over, and you wouldn't put your foot on the ground.
The end of the first phase really happened right where we're sitting at Winslow's battery, because when the Anderson's Georgians broke through de Trobriand's line along the Stonewall in front of the guns, the Union troops are running behind the guns so that they can switch to canister and deal with these Georgians coming up, and it's the canister that literally stops them in their tracks as they're coming across the field, gives the Union troops chance to regroup for a moment, but it's really these guns that are going to hold off that.
Yeah, you're going to want to get behind a stone wall if you have a stone wall near you.
And the Confederates don't bring any artillery to bear in this area, do they? It's all from the ridge?
Right. It's from the ridge.
And these guns are firing exploding shells into the trees, hoping that the limbs breaking apart are going to hold off the Georgians.
Yeah. Jeez. All right. Well, let's get into some of the questions now. Quinn 2477 says, "Can you talk about the charge of the PA reserves in the Wheatfield? I've read a bit about the 11th PA reserves in the book 3 Years in the Bloody 11th and their role, but was hoping you could give an overall picture of how important the charge actually was." Who wants to take that one there? Jessie, you want to take that one? You're the guest today. Go ahead, Jess.
Sure.
Take it.
So as you probably know already from reading the book, the reserves come in at the very end of this, and it says mainly Georgians from Wofford's Brigade have come down the Wheatfield Road. They're clearing the U.S. regulars out of the field, and I believe there might be something coming up on the U.S. regulars as well.
Yeah, there's a question.
After the U.S. regulars are pushed out of the field, basically the Georgians outflank the entire division of regulars coming into the field. That's when Crawford's division is coming through. But at that time, you also have the 6th Corps also filling in the ridge. So now, they've got that fallback position forming on Cemetery Ridge. And so as these Union soldiers are giving way, now they've got that position, to fall back to. They've got the safety of the ridge next to Little Round Top, but you've got these whole corps of infantry coming in. And I think it's Edward Porter Alexander that says that just the sound of them coming was what told him that fresh troops were coming at the end of all this. So honestly, when the reserves get here, the Georgians, knowing that the 6th Corps is on the field arriving, they're being called back to the further western edges of the Wheatfield. So the Stony Hill and part of the Rose Farm, it goes uphill through the Rose Farm.
So except for...
So it's like they're being called out as the reserves are coming in.
Right.
But there is a fight where there's a stone wall that I don't know if Bob mentioned, but that's on the eastern edge of the field, the eastern boundary of the field. And it's where the U.S. regulars had come from. They swing in from that stone wall. It's parallel to Cemetery Ridge. Mm-hmm. And the Georgians and some, I believe, South Carolinians had gotten up to that wall when the reserves are coming. So there's a fight right there at the wall before the Georgians pull off the field. So that's where the reserves get into a fight, and that's where they've got their monuments along that line right there. Right. So that's the majority of the fighting that they're involved in.
Ayers Avenue, right, over there?
And the rest is just kind of,
where their monuments are?
In my opinion, just like shaking their fists as the Confederates are pulling back. But you really have to look at it from the Confederate point of view. You've got these troops running toward you, and you know that more are on the way, that you haven't fought yet, and you thought that this was it.
Yeah.
You thought that this was the fight, and you've given it your all, especially Tig Anderson's Georgians, who have come into this fight again and again throughout the entire thing. I think they're the only... Are they the only brigade that does that? They come back into it, well, other than Schweitzer's in the Union side, coming back after they'd already fought in the field. So they're really fighting. They're going back, kind of regrouping by the Rose Farm and just re-entering the fight over and over again till the end of it.
Because there's nobody.
It's like you've run a marathon and you're at the end of it and you're just giving your last to get over. Because Alexander talks about coming up over the peach orchard and then realizing that wasn't, the main line. It's just completely crushing.
Yeah,
they're completely exhausted,
and there are no reinforcements for the Confederates. So the guys that make any of the gains are also the ones that have to exploit the gains.
So, and the huge advantage you're having is the shape of Meade's line, that it's curving back on itself. He's able to shift troops back and forth through the interior lines, and, Longstreet just has what he has. There's nothing. Gaining troops at that point in time.
And he's at 2/3 of his strength anyway, to begin with, because Pickett's not here.
Correct. Right.
Okay. You about to say something, Bob? Looked like you were getting ready. Okay. All right. So
really, it's more their presence on the field than anything. I'm not saying they're not. What they did here wasn't heroic. It's just they come in kind of at the end of it.
Right.
But
Oh, I see what you're saying.
but
You're saying
that
they
whole,
did nothing.
their presence on the field is influencing the Confederate decision too.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. Gettysburger RN asks, well, this isn't really an asking. He just says, describe the actions of the U.S. regulars in the Wheatfield. And then he has a second question. McCandless's brigade, when they did attack the Wheatfield on July 3rd in relation to, when did they, attack the Wheatfield on July 3rd in relation to other actions going on, such as Farnsworth's charge and Pickett's charge? So I guess the first thing, let's go with the regulars.
Can I do that one if you want to do the?
Yeah, do you want to do the McCandless?
I knew nothing about the third day in the Wheatfield, but so back to for the U.S. regulars coming in, they come in right before the reserves, and they're going to take position really on that same stone wall. They have to come across the Plum Run Valley, which is very marshy, very muddy, so it's kind of difficult for them to even maintain order getting here. But they have little time to shift themselves and get ready for this. So you have Roman Ayres Division. He's got 2 brigades, Hannibal Day and Sidney and Burbank. And Day's men are going to be the closest to Devil's Den, and then Burbank's men are going to be along the stone wall. And if you've ever come down the Wheatfield Road and seen the monument that looks like Stonehenge for the reserves, that's going to be like their right flank. And the left wheel we're talking about is going to happen, so the really Day's men are going to be the pivot point as they're going to wheel in through the field. It's because they got information from Caldwell as Caldwell's division was exiting the field. So again, getting here as people are leaving, giving you bad directions. This is what happens. And, they're talking about the Confederates coming in front of these guns, coming up through the woods. And so the regulars are going to wheel to meet that, but they're doing that when the lines from the west are kind of cresting this ridge of the Stony Hill and coming in this way. So really, as soon as they start to make their wheel into the field, they realize that, oh no, here comes this wave of Confederates from our right flank. And they're going to stop and make a stand in the middle of it, firing at them. And what happens as the Confederates come through the Wheatfield toward them in Little Round Top, it forces really the entirety of the regulars to bunch together toward the Devil's Den area, and just in sort of a mob that they've got to sort out, trying to get out of here across that muddy, murky Plum Run Valley. It kind of works out for Hannibal Day a little bit because they're already kind of able to pivot back and get out of here first across the valley. But at this point, Devil's Den has been taken over by the Confederates, and they've got sharpshooters up there just firing away at them as they're getting stuck in the mud trying to get out of here. So they take most of their casualties during the retreat, just trying to get across that Plum Run Valley.
Trying to get away. All right, and so then, Bob, July 3rd, McCandless's brigade. You don't often hear about this one. We all know Pickett's charge on July 3rd, Farnsworth's charge. Well, tell us about McCandless.
Well, actually, we've got our executive producer here, Eric Mahoney, and if I'm not mistaken, he had a relative who fought in this brigade. Am I right about that, Eric?
No, my relative was in the 149th Pennsylvania on the first day.
Oh, okay. But you do know about this.
Yeah, I've always been kind of interested in the Pennsylvania reserves, and particularly the 13th reserves. So on the 3rd, right, so the reserves are holding that stone wall along the west end of the Wheatfield all through the night of the 2nd and in through
East
the
End.
East End, I'm sorry. The morning of the 3rd, the 13th reserves are on the left flank of McCandless's brigade, and they're taking fire from the Devil's Den area. So early in the morning, the regimental commander sent companies I and K of the 13th Reserves to go to try to clear out Devil's Den. Well, it didn't work. There were too many rebels there. And so they get pushed back. About noon, they sent Company K, which was only about 30 men, over towards the Devil's Den to try one more time. And they end up skirmishing between, the end of the reserves line and Devil's Den until about 2 o'clock. So for about an hour after the cannonade preceding Pickett's charge starts off, they're over there shooting at each other around the Devil's Den. About 2 o'clock, they pull Company K back. At 5 p.m., so this is after the repulse of Pickett's charge, around about 5 p.m.
And after Farnsworth's charge, to get to the question.
This is like the end of everything.
Yeah.
The Pennsylvania Reserves, McCandless's brigade are sent to clear the Wheatfield, and what they essentially do is they move out from behind their stone wall and basically swing into, is this Rose's Woods over here?
Well, you got West Rose's Woods behind, South Rose's Woods to the...
So South Rose's Woods. They swing into that area and capture a whole bunch of Georgians over there. I believe they're Anderson's Georgians.
Probably.
Sergeant Thompson from Company B, 13th Reserves, actually gets a Medal of Honor for capturing the colors of the 15th Georgia over in those woods. There's a quote.
Ooh, 15th Georgia, that might have been Benning.
Yeah, I think you're right. That is Benning's brigade. So the history of the 2nd Reserves claims that their charge was so successful that they ended up killing Confederate butchers as they were skinning beef over in those woods.
Wow, that's great.
And one of the guys from the 19th Georgia, who's captured by the 2nd Reserves, he's kind of surprised. He says to a guy in the 2nd Reserves, he says, "Why, we captured you at Fredericksburg," he said. "Are you the 2nd Reserves? Damn you! You always give us hell when you meet us."
Oh, great quote.
And that kind of ends the action. They clear Benning's brigade out of Rose's Woods, and then I believe the entire 5th Corps moves up to the original tortured line.
Yeah. So, and when they came across the field, they're mopping up. What are they finding?
McCandless in his report actually says they picked up between 2,000 and 3,000 stand of arms here in the Wheatfield. Now that's Confederate and Federal arms laying around. They clear out a 2-gun section that's over here along the ridge between Rose's farm and the peach orchard as well. But that's kind of about all they say about it, really.
But just the fact that they picked up so many small arms on the field is testimony to the carnage and the fighting that had taken place the previous day on July 2nd.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a pretty deadly little patch of wheat.
Yeah, I think a case could be made that inch for inch, this is the bloodiest ground on this field. What do you think, Jess? Okay, depending on... Okay, I hear you. Maybe...
I think the absent Tim Smith would agree with you. It's a pretty good argument for you.
I mean, if you just want to narrowly define Pickett's charge to the dead around the stone wall, that would probably be worse. But for us...
No, I agree with you first. Yeah. This is it.
I usually tell people on tours, inch for inch, this is the bloodiest spot of real estate on this battlefield.
Yeah, all right.
Think outside the bus and let Getty's Bike Tours show you the only way to truly experience Gettysburg. There's a reason why Getty's Bike Tours is the longest running bicycle tour company in Gettysburg, and that's because they put the customer's experience at the top of their list of priorities. Follow a licensed battlefield guide through some of the most legendary ground in American history. There's a tour route for everyone, from the newbie to the hardcore history buff. So go to gettysbike.com or call 717-752-7752 and book your reservation today. Mention addressing Gettysburg and receive 10% off your tour. That's gettysbike.com or 717-752-7752. Discount does not apply to rentals.
My favorite place to go. Mason-Dixon Distillery. They create their award-winning spirits from grain grown on Gettysburg National Military Park. And they cook their comfort food from ingredients sourced from local farms. For great food, amazing drinks, engaging conversation, and plenty of on-site parking, which is really hard to find here in Gettysburg, head over to Mason-Dixon Distillery, located at 331 East Water Street. Mention you heard this ad on Addressing Gettysburg and get a free dessert with any meal. That's right, I said free, just because you mentioned this show. That's Mason-Dixon Distillery, 331 East Water Street, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
What's up, guys? My name's John. I am the Tattooed Historian. And if you want friction-free history, edgy, new, exciting, you're going to want to check out my podcast, The Tattooed Historian Show, on iTunes or Spotify.
Victorian Photography Studio, located on Steinwar Avenue in historic downtown Gettysburg, is a vintage tintype and digital portrait studio. With hundreds of dresses and uniforms, as well as period-correct props and backgrounds, VPS can help you capture the perfect moment in time. As one of the few remaining practitioners of the craft, the photographers at VPS are trained in the history and artistry of wet plate collodion photography. So stop on in or book online for a truly unique Gettysburg experience. Go to VictorianPhotographyStudio.com and follow them on Facebook and Instagram at VPS_Gettysburg. That's VictorianPhotographyStudio.com and at VPS_Gettysburg on social media.
Life lessons from American history. Here's one you can use today for personal growth. Gettysburg Lessons with one of two valuable lessons from Edward Cross. Failure is predictable. We all have the ability to determine when or how we are going to fail. Cross predicted on 3 occasions when he was going to die. And he died right here. The result of his prediction was no surprise. The influence of a negative thought leads to negative behavior that produces a negative result.
To get the full classroom course of Gettysburg Lessons, go to GettysburgLessons.com/schools.
Dog tags in the Civil War, one of the most devastating Union defeats took place in Florida, Confederate Lancers in New Mexico, a camel as a regimental mascot. Learn this and more on the Untold Civil War podcast, available on iTunes, Spotify, and Buzzsprout website.
Do you have a local business in Gettysburg? Do you want to reach people who are itching to visit us, but don't know exactly where to stay, where to eat, or what to do while they're here? Well, then you should consider advertising on Addressing Gettysburg. You can reach thousands of Gettysburg enthusiasts per month who are within a 4 to 8 hour drive of us, as well as all over the world. Reach them where they are before they're already in town. This is the more affordable and more 21st century way to advertise. So contact us at advertise@addressinggettysburg.com for more information. That's advertise@addressinggettysburg.com.
The great Trinetti, he says, I'm wondering if you've ever come across a regimental history of the 64th New York or know anything specific about their regiment. I've asked similar questions before, but Matt never asked them. No. He says, I've asked similar questions before, but I'm looking for any info I can find. Company G of that regiment is from my hometown and holds a place in my heart. And his hometown just had a murder in it this past week.
Really?
Horrible murder. Yeah.
Well, we'll have to hear about that sometime.
Yeah. Oh, it's
talk
terrible.
about horrible things right where we're sitting. There's also something horrible happened in the 1990s. But Jess, I am not going to be able to touch this with any kind of specificity. Hopefully you can.
Yeah.
But even if you can't, I'm wondering if you could put a call out there on the guide website saying, hey, any of you guides know something about this,
Yeah,
then
probably.
get in touch with this guy.
I did look up the specific regiments people were asking about, and where I like to start whenever I'm looking up a specific regiment is just with I don't have any of like the original Pennsylvania at Gettysburg or New York at Gettysburg books, but they're online on a website called archive.org, and you can even search it by regiment, and that you can find the dedication speeches of all the monuments in there. And so it's the men that fought here telling you what they did blow by blow through the battle, and it's a good starting point. But I also cheat by looking on Stone Sentinel's website to look at the, just to jog, especially, New York regiments, because they're also, it's hard to keep them straight.
Yeah.
But the 64th is part of Brooks Brigade, and their monument is right by the Brook Rock, up on the ridge in front of the guns. I say behind me, but I'm taking shelter behind the monument. From
southwest of the guns.
But Henry Fuller's part of the 64th New York. So there's a scavenger hunt in this for you if you come to the battlefield. There's a old trolley trail that goes right through the woods where Brooks Brigade had to cross before they came up the slope to the furthest reaches of the Union soldiers in the field out there, where they have their monuments in a line. But one of their captains, it's not Company G, but Henry Fuller was killed, and he was loved by the men in the regiment. And there's a monument to where that happened on the banks of a little stream that runs through the woods there, which is, it's hard to find.
Yeah.
And it's usually pretty swampy down there, but this time of year you can see through the trees, so usually there's like a flag on it or something to help you find it. But as you get up and you walk up, there's like kind of like a deer path that you can follow across the trolley trail and up the ridge to the 64th New York Monument. And right before you get to it, there's a rock that Brook, the brigade commander, came back and carved an X in the rock to mark where they had made it in the field. And you can still see that little X carved into the rock.
Didn't he also stand on that rock, too, to get a look, and that's where he was wounded?
Okay.
No, I'm asking you.
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I have heard that before.
You've heard, okay. Yeah, and for those of you who are really interested in Wheatfield stuff and the things that Jess was just talking about, in May, our Get Out of the Car walk is going to go through the Wheatfield, following the path of the 27th Connecticut, I think. Is that right? Do you remember?
I'm not sure what Lewis is.
I think it's the 27th Connecticut, and then we're going to we're going to see Brook Rock, and we're going to see the Captain Fuller marker and other things there. So, provided we're all alive and allowed out of our homes by that point, that will be our May tour.
But I'd say one more thing, like if you're looking for specifics on like by company, one thing I did find, I forget the website, but there was a website that produced an article in the newspaper. It was, they're publishing articles for the families back home to see who's killed and wounded in each battle, and it breaks it down by company. So you can look and see the officers killed and wounded, the wounds they received, and that sort of thing. So that, if you're looking for graves of people that fought here that are close to you, that would be a good, thing to start with.
Okay.
And you can find that by just searching the internet.
All right. Forgive me if I'm butchering the name here, but Bilanco from Instagram, he writes, "Hey Matt, hope you're well. Big fan of the podcast and fellow Stern fan / depression sufferer." What a combo. Anyways, I have a question regarding the Wheatfield if it's not too late. My 3 times great-grandfather and his brother were both in the 118th Pennsylvania on Stony Hill at the beginning of the fighting in that area on July 2nd. The thing is, I know they weren't there for very long before they were pulled back by command. So my question is two-headed. First, why was the regiment removed from the front lines right in the thick of things? And second, can you talk about what the 118th PA actually did experience that day? And as so many other troops were marching directly into the Wheatfield and fighting, was the 128th PA simply forced to watch from behind? Not sure I understand all that, but you guys are the guides, and maybe that means you're smarter, so you would understand. Let's start with the first part of that question there. And I believe this is the last question that we have. By the way, his name is Serge. The first question, why was the regiment removed from the front lines right in the thick of things? 118th PA. That's right over there, right? The Corn Exchange? Is that them?
Yep, that's the Corn Exchange.
That's the Corn Exchange. Okay. And Matt was pointing to the northwest.
That's right.
Actually, at the Trussell Woods area, one of their monuments is there on the Wheatfield Road. As you're heading east, you can see it on the left, and it just says Corn Exchange on it, as amongst other words.
And a lot of people get confused, and I've seen tourists with bushels of corn putting them on top of the monument, waiting for someone to come and exchange the corn.
They were jealous of the wheat field, and they wanted to exchange corn for the name because it was good.
Yeah, but nobody's really taking it up,
right.
Taking them up on it. No, but go ahead. So what did the 118th? What brigade were they in?
They're Tilton's Brigade. That's one of the 2 5th Corps brigades. I'm right about this, right? And it's one of the 2 5th Corps brigades that's been brought in here. Barnes's division, and they're going to help Sickles hold this advanced line, and they're on this Stony Hill area that Jess had mentioned earlier. They will be involved in a not major way, but in repulsing the first Confederate attack of Anderson's brigade.
Okay,
and then they're going to be pulled out? I'm trying to remember exactly.
They get pulled out because they're outflanked by the South Carolinians.
No, and
So they
Kershaw
really
came.
don't have a choice. When they're
Right,
pulled out of
that's
here,
right.
it was the right decision.
Is this also when the Irish
initially.
Brigade falls back too?
No.
Is this the same
No,
time?
they're here before the Irish Brigade.
Yeah.
Right,
So they're the
okay.
ones. I think they're the rightmost regiment up on that knoll. So they're on the flank. The 118th.
The 118th. Okay.
Regiment is on the flank when the South
The
Carolinians
flank-
start heading for the Stony Hill.
The flank of the Irish Brigade, or
No,
what
the
do
Irish
you say?
They're
It's
there
not here
before
yet.
the Irish Brigade.
Oh, right.
Okay, so that's the Caldwell's division of the Second Corps, which is coming. Actually,
Okay.
those men will have to pass through the men of Tilton's brigade on their way here. The
So-
Irish Brigade's going to have to kind of go sort of through for the Irish Brigade.
So they're coming next.
Yes, gotcha.
A little bit
Gotcha.
east from
And then, so who's to the right of the Irish Brigade when they're up there? Is that
Well,
Zook?
again, they're
Zook's
not
coming.
here at
Zook.
the same time. So the 118th Pennsylvania, which had been
He's
on the
trying to
Stony
make this
Hill.
about the Irish Brigade. So
I know.
so
He's
hard.
Irish.
No. It's
It's
because I
just not. It's just not about the Irish
during the
Brigade.
social distance.
Because I just no. I just read about them, and now I'm just trying to get it clear in my own head where we are. So, but go ahead. This isn't about
so
me
that's
anyway.
a little
so go
later
ahead.
stage. But,
Yeah.
but the 118th and Tilton and Schweitzer's brigade had been south of the Wheatfield Road, part of the fight, stopping Anderson, pulled back, as Jess is correct, when the Kershaw's brigade of South Carolinians are attacking because they're in an exposed position.
Okay.
And they're pulled back. They're not pulled too far, though. They're just pulled back to the other side of the Wheatfield Road. They're in the Trossel Woods, kind of like where that, in the area where that monument is, it says the Corn Exchange on the Wheatfield Road.
Okay.
And so they're not too far away. They've just been pulled back a little bit. And then with the Confederates driving Sickles's men out of here, the Second Corps men, Caldwell's division, Hancock's Corps, arrives with the Irish Brigade. They are probably not going to be passing through the 118th Pennsylvania. It's probably Zook's brigade, which was to the right of Caldwell's division, that's going to be doing that. But there's some accounts that say something like some of the men of this brigade saying, just walk right over us. They're lying prone. Just walk right over us. Like,
Okay.
welcome to the Wheatfield fight.
Right.
It's your turn. We don't want any part of this anymore. And so I'm pretty sure the 118th is not going to be re-involved in this Wheatfield fight in a major way, because when Caldwell's division come through, they take the heat, they push the Confederates back.
But the other brigade in Barnes's division, Schweitzer's brigade, goes back into the fight, and Tilton's does not. But they're facing a different way. So, like, Schweitzer's brigade was facing us from the Wheatfield Road, but Tilton's brigade was facing west. So you kind of have to imagine then what they start to see by the time that they get pulled out of here. They're not involved in what Schweitzer's men are doing, but they're the right flank. They're the right flank of this Union action right here, and they're trying to hold that part of the line, but they're watching as this, Confederate avalanche now starts coming down toward them as the Peach Orchard and really the apex of Sickles' salient is starting to crumble. And those Union soldiers are, there's some horrible things that they're seeing as the Union soldiers are, finally having to give ground. And as the Confederates are breaking through, that is headed right for them, downhill toward them. And then Tilton makes the decision to pull them
Had to be a
ultimately
pretty
back
scary
for
sight.
good.
Yeah, and it's particularly moving to actually sit in the middle of the field and talk about this stuff and look at the spots and imagine, like sitting down is actually a pretty interesting perspective, because we're sitting behind Winslow's battery, and I'm looking down in the area of the stone wall that Bob was talking about on the south end of the field, and Just imagining like a whole bunch of Confederates coming up that way.
Well, and you're coming into the field from either direction, Confederate or Union, and you're seeing what's happened to the people that are stumbling out of here.
Yeah.
And you're having to climb over bodies, people that need help, people that are dead, pieces of people, especially up by these guns.
Delicious.
And one of the stories I like to tell in this fight that kind of gives you the perspective of a Union soldier coming out of this is that they don't know what's happening anywhere else than their very small window of vision, and they don't know that they're even having success anywhere else on the field.
Right.
And this is a disaster for the Union troops, falling out of here over and over again. They just can't hold this line.
Wow.
And until the reserves come in and
staunch the flow.
Right. But what happens at the Stonewall in the first time the Union lines break, you have the 17th Maine. You can see the red diamond on their monument. They're trying to hold on to the Stonewall. They got some reinforcements from Burling's 3rd Corps Brigade, but it's like when you split apart a command to plug in the gaps, they don't know who to listen to. And so when the Georgians were coming at them, the men from Burling's brigade to their right pull back, and now there's this hole that they're having to deal with, and they turn back their line just like Chamberlain's men on Little Round Top. And they hold as long as they can until they ultimately just can't any longer. They have to pull back. So there are two men in that regiment. One tells a story. I forget his name off the top of my head, but he writes an account of this and coming up to these guns, and that they get behind the guns, and you feel this feeling of relief, like you're safe. But then you watch as they switch to canister and just blow the people away in front. And he said the blood ran like water in front of the guns. And they think they got their ticket out of here. But then Regis de Trobriand, who's in charge of this line, they're out of ammunition. They stayed at the wall as long as they could. But he's having them fix bayonets to try to countercharge to buy time for people coming in. And they're just like, it takes everything you have to do that. And when they start fixing bayonets, they kind of see this look in the Georgians' eyes like, oh, they're out of bullets. So they make this countercharge around these guns, but then they're called off the field. And as they're heading for the safety of like the shoulder of Little Round Top, this man is trying to help his friend who's been wounded in the regiment, and he's trying to limp him off the field through the mud, through the muck and everything. And they finally get to the safety of this shoulder of Little Round Top and behind it. And he said they just collapsed and they both started to cry because, number one, they're completely exhausted, but they thought they'd lost the battle. So, to deal with all of that and think that it's all over, then they've done it again. The Confederates have won.
But that's a good point too. When people read about this stuff from a God's eye point of view, and we know everything, these guys don't know that stuff. They don't know what else is going on anywhere. So all they know is what they can see and what they've experienced. And that I like that story. That puts a little perspective on it.
And for a good budding author out there, Michael Shaw is now dead, but what he helps do for the 20th Maine and Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, his name was Colonel Morrill, I think. Morrill, the commander of the 17th Maine. But any event, there's a story there. Running out of ammunition.
I'll try to find that account for you if you want to put it up on Facebook or something.
It's
Morrill. That's what I thought. And it's a dramatic scene if you want to just look at one regiment. It was the early parts of the Wheatfield fight, but it was
with Maine regiments just getting in the worst possible spots all over the battlefield.
When I give tours to people from Maine, I'll say the name of this tour is The Main Reason We Won, and I'm spelling that both ways, and they like that because Maine is the center of the universe.
Maine really fascinating stuff.
16th
Maine.
We just had a post on the Facebook page go up yesterday about the 16th Maine being basically slaughtered out on Oak Ridge.
They lose well over 70%.
Go ahead.
I had somebody on a tour tell me once, he's like, the state of Maine had more men enlist out of any Union state. And I'm like, no. And he's like, no, I read it somewhere. I'm like,
did he mean per capita?
No.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Right. And then I'm like, oh, I know what you mean. Like for the men that were of, eligible age in the state of Maine, they had the highest percentage of people enlist, which is crazy when you think about it, because when you think of the entire state of Maine and how rural it was, how far apart people are just from each other, to have that sense of, I don't know, community and calling for, to save your country when you're way up, you're basically Canada at some point, And you have Canadians coming to join the Maine regiments
that
too.
is fascinating to think about what motivated people back in those days to go and fight this war.
Well, and was it, they live out in the middle of nowhere in Maine, the sense of adventure to get off
they're
and
brawny.
and do
they
something.
like getting into fights. Now they have an excuse. They can get in a fight and kill somebody and not go to jail for it. That's what I'm thinking it was about.
Our apologies to all of our listeners from Maine. Look, I've been watching them gather, and now they're getting closer.
Who, the Hawks?
The turkey vultures.
The turkey vultures. Oh.
Just imagine what this place
because
looks like.
It's so cold out here, they could feel the life shivering out of our bodies.
First,
I really wouldn't have survived without your blanket, Bob.
There was one sitting on the fence back there, just kind of hungrily looking at us for a while. Are those guys dead or what?
Like, what are they doing?
That's why I'd get up and walk around.
But you were making a battle point, and I ruined it. Go ahead. You were saying...
Just the vultures are reminding me of just the carnage, the detritus of the battle afterwards. The couple of thousand small arms that Eric talked about that McCandless's men picked up the next day as testimony. The fact that you could walk from one end of the field to the other without putting your feet on the ground. The stories of Hogs coming out of the field.
That's what I wanted to end with. So we've won. Well, we haven't. Well, the Wheatfield is now in no man's land. The lines have settled into wherever they want to settle into. Tell us about the Hogs.
Go ahead, Jess.
Well, that brings us back to this from the Corn Exchange Regiment, right? Isn't it? The 118th? Or he's left out on the field and there are wild hogs that roam the area, and they're rooting through people that have just died, and there's a man in the 118th who's wounded on the field. He's still alive, but...
An officer, right? Lieutenant, Captain? I think?
If you know more of the specifics, I don't tell the pig story.
I thought I'd heard you or somebody say it was a captain. Whatever. Yeah. Captain,
in my mind, he's a lieutenant.
It's a difference.
But my mind gets confused sometimes. I think his name might have been Verrazzo, but I'm not positive.
That sounds familiar.
So anyway, go ahead.
No, so anyway, but it doesn't matter who the details.
But he was wounded out
here,
right?
The Hogs.
And he was left
What's going on with the
Hogs? Are not only eating dead people, but, they're making their way through the Wheatfield. But there are also wild hogs that are rooting through the piles of limbs by the hospital sites. Ugh. So it's not just this story of the man from the 118th fending off the pigs overnight, but there are stories of people, they're on the operating table or waiting for it, and they're looking out the window, seeing the pigs rooting through the arms and legs. So you kind of feel for Sickles a little bit. You see why he wants to keep his leg with him.
So now you say it's wild hogs. It's not from the Rose Farm.
Pigs.
I'm not positive about that because local farmers would have lost their hogs during the advance of the Confederates.
That's possible.
So it's possible.
But there were wild pigs that lived in this area.
There were.
Yeah, but I know you don't.
Interesting.
Farmers will tell me that a hog will eat anything, whether it's wild or not, that they'll eat anything. I gave a tour to
Speaking
Harold
of the end
Steele.
of the mic, Bob. Speaking of the end of the mic.
I gave a tour to a man named Harold Steele. I hope he's still doing well. He used to work for the Farm Credit Administration in Washington. In my first year giving tours, he hired me a couple of times to give tours, and I was a rookie. This was back in 1991, and pretty naive, as I still am, I guess. But I said to him, Harold, let me ask you something. I've read about it. I don't tell people on the tours because I don't believe it, that hogs were eating people out here on this field. And he looked at me like I was stupid and said, didn't you ever see The Wizard of Oz? Yeah. Well, why do you think Dorothy was so upset when she fell into the hogs?
Yeah, well, everybody went running after her like it was the end of the world.
And I had never given any thought to that. And then he proceeded to tell me a story about his own father, who died while he was feeding hogs.
Oh.
He was a hog farmer. And no one knew that he had some sort of an ulcer on his leg until they found him hours later, and the hogs have just been taking bites out of his leg. So ever since, those are not just wild hogs. I mean, they're domestic hogs. And now anytime I eat a hot dog made of pork, I eat it with relish.
You can really get an excellent bonus story on this episode.
Bob.
But there's good
I eat it
stories
with
too
relish.
here. I still see that buzzer.
Well, haven't you seen Hannibal? Did you ever see Hannibal?
Yeah, right.
They throw guys to the hogs and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've talked to Vietnam War vets who will confirm that this kind of thing as well.
I always thought that they were making a big deal out of Dorothy falling in there because that was her only nice dress. You know, back then it was harder to get nice clothes.
So,
all right, well, so go ahead. You want to close up
just
on the hogs?
a little bit higher note, if that's okay. We're getting close to Easter here, and here at the Wheatfield, this scene of incredible carnage. You've got Confederates on one side of the field the night of July 2nd, and Union soldiers on the other side of the field. And in this hellish scene, a Georgia soldier, I believe he was a tenor, I think he might have been from the 8th Georgia, is going to start singing a gospel hymn. It's "Come ye disconsolate, where'er ye languish, come to the mercy seat, fervently kneel. Here bring your wounded heart, here tell your anguish. Earth has no sorrow that heaven cannot heal." And I can't help but think that there were other Christians around this Wheatfield that night, both in gray uniforms and blue, who were taking some comfort from this gospel song that was being sung by this Confederate soldier. So just something to think about for Easter.
All right. Or they became atheists.
They became atheists,
I don't believe that anymore after this day.
I'm sure there were some who did that too.
All right. Well, everybody, we hope you're doing well. You're healthy and not sick or coroned.
I now see 3 vultures.
Okay. Bob sees vultures.
I think it's time for us to go.
Okay, they're starting to gang up on
they're
us
getting
now.
closer.
Anyway, be well.
Oh, they're sitting on the.
Okay, we'll
he's
keep
sitting
on going.
on Zook's death marker.
Oh, that's right.
my
Zook was
Lord,
ill.
look
There's
at
one
that.
sitting. There's 4, and there's another one. 5. This is getting serious,
Listen
guys.
back to this episode.
We're now more vultures than
man.
we.
This is going to be like the Blair Witch Project or something. Like, they're going to find our corpses out here with our eyeballs eaten out and this recorder. I'm so scared.
There'll be hogs picking at her bones, too.
There you go.
All right. Now, seriously, everybody, I hope you're all right. Stay all right. Do all the social distancing stuff. Don't forget, hey, we're up to 45 patrons now. I want to thank you all for that. And that's a good way to support this so you can keep more of this stuff going throughout the entire year. If you don't want to do that, I know you shop at Amazon. So go to addressinggettysburg.com, click the Amazon banner at the top of the homepage, and shop as you normally do. And we might get some credit if your sales qualify. But the best thing you can do is like and share this stuff. That is the best way to support this show because that just means more people. Thank you all. We will put up a poll on the Patreon page for the next location to do one of these. We're going to keep doing them while the weather is nice and while we're not allowed to go indoors. And that is it. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jessie. Jessie, you're supposed to say thank you, Matt. You're so wonderful. Go ahead.
I turn my mic off so you would hear my convulsing.
You turn the mic off and you just pointed to Eric. And thank you, Eric, for all your help. We'll see you all later. So ungrateful, Jessie.